The world had shrunk to the space between two burning buildings. Smoke, thick and black as crude oil, clawed at the sky above the small town of Harmony Creek, turning a pleasant Tuesday afternoon into a vision of hell. From his precarious perch atop the overturned sheriff's cruiser, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thorne, callsign Ars, watched the bridge. It was the only way in or out of this valley, a simple two-lane stretch of concrete over Sycamore Creek, and his six-man SEAL team was bleeding to hold it. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a heavy machine gun echoed from the old clock tower a quarter-mile down Main Street, each burst chewing another chunk of concrete from the bridges. Guardrails. His men, the best of the best, were pinned down, their state-of-the-art rifles and tactical gear rendered almost useless by an enemy that had appeared out of nowhere, armed with military-grade hardware and a terrifying degree of coordination. Ars. This is Phantom. We've got movement. East side. Hardware store. Looks like they're setting up a mortar, hissed a voice in his ear, strained and breathless. Thorne keyed his MIC, his knuckles white. Copy. Phantom. Hold your position. Air support is delayed. That was the official line. The truth was, it wasn't coming. Command was in chaos, communications were a mess, and Harmony Creek was on its own. He felt a familiar, bitter anger coil in his gut. They were warriors, lions, and they'd been sent into the meat grinder with their teeth filed down. The enemy, calling themselves the First Sons, had anticipated everything. They'd hit the town cell tower first, then the substation. Now they were systematically dismantling the last line of defense. His eyes scanned the far side of the bridge, where a makeshift command post was set up near the National Guard Army. It was a chaotic scene of guardsmen scrambling, their weakened warrior training no match for this onslaught. And in the middle of it all, a sight that made Thorne's jaw tighten with contempt, a single, archaic M1 Abrams tank, a relic from a bygone era, sitting idle. It was a museum piece, really, dragged out for parades and 4th of July celebrations. And crawling over it was the one person at this armory who was, in his professional opinion, more useless than the tank itself, Sergeant Anya Sharma. He'd seen her in the initial briefing, a woman of medium height with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had a quiet intensity about her, a coiled stillness that might have been impressive if she weren't a mechanic. A grease monkey, as his XO had sneered. When the guard commander, a flustered major who looked like he'd rather be selling insurance, had suggested the tank as a potential asset, Thorne had nearly laughed in his face. That thing hasn't fired a live round in 20 years, Thorne had said, his voice dripping with disdain. Its targeting systems are ancient. Its armor is obsolete. It's a 50-ton steel coffin. He'd looked directly at Sharma, who stood beside the major, her expression unreadable. And you expect one of your mechanics to drive it into that? He gestured toward the town. Where the first plumes of smoke were rising, Sharma had met his gaze without flinching. I'm not just a mechanic, Lieutenant Commander. I'm a certified Abrams master gunner. And that steel coffin is the only armor you've got. The memory of her calm, steady voice grated on him now as another volley of gunfire sent. His men diving for cover. He had dismissed her, waved her off with a curt, "Stay out of my way, Sergeant. The professionals will handle this." Now, his professionals were being systematically dismantled. The bridge was a kill zone. The enemy was patient, methodical, and they were tightening the noose. He had promised the mayor he would hold this bridge, that he would protect the evacuation. Route for the civilians still trapped in the town hall on the other side. It was a promise he was beginning to fear he couldn't keep. A sudden, deafening explosion rocked the street as the mortar-round Phantom had spotted found its mark. It landed short of the bridge, but the concussion wave was immense, shattering the windows of the diner behind Thorne's position and sending a shower of glass and debris across the asphalt. He felt a sharp sting in his cheek. He touched it, and his fingers came away wet with blood. The situation was deteriorating faster than he could have imagined. The enemy wasn't just trying to take the bridge, they were trying to demoralize them. To break them piece by piece. He looked back toward the armory. Through his binoculars, he could see Sharma arguing with the major. Her hands were moving, sharp and precise, pointing first at the tank, then at the bridge. The major was shaking his head, his face pale with fear. Thorne didn't need to hear the words to understand the conversation. She wanted to move. She wanted to take that rust bucket into the fray. The sheer, unadulterated foolishness of it was staggering. She would be annihilated before she even reached the bridge entrance. It was a suicide run, and for what? A grand, pointless gesture. He felt a flicker of something he refused to name. It wasn't pity. It was closer to irritation, the kind you feel for a fly buzzing around your head when you're trying to concentrate on matters of life and death. This was his battle, his responsibility. He didn't have time for the delusions of a small-town guard mechanic who'd watched one too many war movies. He had real soldiers, his soldiers, dying just a few hundred yards away. Ours, this is Reaper. I'm out of 40 Mike. Pinned down behind the bakery truck. Phantom is hit. I repeat, Phantom is hit. The voice was strained, bordering on panic. Thorne's blood ran cold. Phantom was his best sniper. What's his status, Reaper? Took shrapnel to the leg. He's bleeding bad. I can't get to him. The machine gun has us zeroed. This was it. The breaking point. The moment a commander has to choose between bad options and worse ones. He could order a retreat, abandon the bridge, and leave the civilians to their fate. Or he could order a charge, a desperate, costly push to take out that machine gun nest. Men would die. Good men. His men. He weighed the lives of his team against the lives of strangers in the town hall. It was a calculus no one should ever have. To make. He was about to give the order, the one that would send his men into the meat grinder, when a new sound cut through the cacophony of battle. It wasn't the crack of rifles or the boom of mortars. It was a low, guttural roar, a sound of immense power waking from a long slumber. Thorne swiveled his head, his binoculars finding the source instantly. The M1 Abrams, its turbine engine was whining, spitting a plume of black smoke from its exhaust. The tank, which had been a static monument of faded olive drab just moments before, was now alive. It trembled with contained energy, its massive cannon seeming to sniff the air. And, in the commander's hatch, silhouetted against the chaos, was Sergeant Anya Sharma. She had a helmet on, her face grim and set. She wasn't asking for permission anymore. Thorne felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. What in God's name does she think she's doing? He snarled into his comms, directing the question at the armory's frequency. Major, get your sergeant under control. I will not have her jeopardize my operation. The major's voice came back, weak and tinny. She's cut her comms, Lieutenant Commander. She said the professionals were busy and someone had to save the town. The insult landed like a physical blow. Thorne watched, frozen in a mixture of fury and disbelief, as the tank lurched forward. It was slow, ponderous, a beast from another age. The enemy noticed it immediately. The chatter of small arms fire intensified, bullets pinging harmlessly off the tank's thick hide like angry hornets. Then, the heavy machine gun in the clock tower swiveled, its attention shifting from the SEALs on the bridge to the lumbering giant crawling toward it. A stream of .50 caliber rounds, each one capable of punching through a cinderblock wall, slammed into the front of the Abrams. The impacts were deafening, a percussive storm of steel on steel. The tank shuddered but kept moving. It was a magnificent, terrible sight. A lone, antiquated warrior marching into a storm of modern fire. She's insane, Thorne muttered, unable to look away. She's going to get herself and her crew killed. He watched as the tank's turret began to rotate. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace that belied the violence it was about to unleash. It swung past the burning buildings, past the abandoned cars, its long cannon methodically scanning the street until it centered directly on the clock tower. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The world held its breath. The SEALs on the bridge, the hidden enemy fighters, Thorne himself, all eyes were on the tank. Anya's voice, clear and shockingly calm, suddenly crackled over the open tactical channel, overriding all others. It wasn't the guard's frequency, or the SEAL's frequency. It was the emergency broadcast channel, the one no one was supposed to use. The one everyone could hear. This is Sergeant Anya Sharma of the Harmony Creek National Guard, she said, her voice steady as a rock. To the cowards hiding in the clock tower, you have taken aim at American soldiers and American civilians. You have brought war to our home. There was a pause, a beat of perfect, dramatic silence. Thorne could feel the hairs on his arm stand. Up now, Anya's voice continued, losing its calm and taking on a hard, sharp edge of cold fury. You get to see what a real American soldier can do. The world erupted in a cataclysm of fire and sound. A brilliant orange fireball blossomed from the end of the Abrams cannon. The shockwave hit a split second later, a physical punch to the chest that rattled Thorne's teeth. The massive 120 millimeters. Shell screamed across the distance, a streak of grey against the smoke-filled sky. It struck the clock tower not with a simple explosion, but with an impact that seemed to shatter the very laws of physics. The top half of the tower disintegrated. Bricks, gears, and the hands of the clock were vaporized in a cloud of dust and fire. The heavy machine gun, and the men who operated it, simply ceased to exist. The oppressive thump-thump-thump that had dictated the rhythm of the battle for hours was replaced by a profound, ringing silence. For a moment, no one moved. The entire battlefield was stunned. Thorne stared at the ruined tower, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The raw, untamed power of it. The sheer, audacious courage of the woman who had unleashed it. He had called her a mechanic. He had called her tanker coffin. He had been wrong. So profoundly, arrogantly wrong. His radio crackled to life. Ours. This is Reaper. Holy. The SEAL couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Thorne watched as the tank, its cannon still smoking, began to advance again, crawling toward the entrance of the bridge. It was no longer just a relic. It was a behemoth, a 50-ton declaration of war. It was their only hope. But as the tank cleared the last of the buildings and exposed its flank to the dozens of enemy positions hidden along the creek, a new sound emerged. It was a high-pitched, electronic squeal, a sound Thorne recognized with a sickening lurch-in. His stomach. It was the lock-on tone of a guided missile. He saw the puff of smoke from a second-story window of the hardware store, the one Phantom had spotted earlier. A small, fast-moving projectile streaked toward the Abrams. It was an anti-tank missile, modern and sophisticated. The kind of weapon a small-town militia should not have. The kind of weapon that could turn even an Abrams into a funeral pyre. Thorne grabbed his MIC, his voice raw with a desperation that shook him. Sharma. Missile. Incoming. You're 9 o'clock. Break. Break. But he knew, even as he shouted the words, that it was too late. The tank was too slow, the missile too fast. He watched, helpless, as the streak of fire and smoke closed the distance in the blink of an eye. He braced for the impact, for the inevitable explosion that would tear the tank apart and end the life of the woman who had just saved his men. The missile struck the Abrams just below the turret. But it didn't explode. Instead, there was a brilliant flash of blue-white light, a sound like a giant bug zapper, and the missile simply fell apart. It clattered to the ground in pieces, its warhead inert, its guidance system fried. Thorne stared, his mouth agape. What had just happened? He looked at the tank, searching for an answer. And then he saw it. A faint, shimmering distortion. In the air around the Abrams, like heat haze on a summer road. It flickered for a second, then vanished. It was some kind of defensive system, something he had never seen before. It wasn't standard issue. It wasn't in any inventory he knew of. Anya's voice came back over the emergency channel, and this time, it was laced with something new. Not fury, not calm, but a chilling, almost predatory confidence. Nice try, she said, her voice echoing. In the sudden silence of the battlefield. My turn. The tank's coaxial machine gun erupted, spitting a stream of tracer rounds into the second-story window of the hardware store. The enemy position was silenced instantly. But Thorne was no longer watching the firefight. His mind was racing, trying to comprehend the impossibility of what he'd just witnessed. That defensive system. It was a ghost. A piece of experimental tech that was rumored to exist only in the most secret R&D labs. It was a black project, a billion-dollar weapon that had no business being on a National Guard tank in the middle of Pennsylvania. Who was Anya Sharma? And what was that machine she was driving? The questions hammered at him, each one more unsettling than the last. He had thought he was in a fight against a well-armed militia. But the missile, the advanced tactics, and now this impossible technology. It pointed to something far more sinister. This wasn't a random act of terror. This was a calculated military operation. And Sergeant Sharma, the woman he had dismissed as a mere mechanic, was somehow at the very center of it. He watched as her tank finally reached the bridge, its massive frame acting as a mobile shield for his men, who were already moving, using the opportunity to pull the wounded Phantom to safety. She had done it. She had broken the stalemate. But as the tank rumbled onto the concrete expanse, its steel treads chewing up the asphalt, Thorne felt a new, colder dread creep over him. The enemy had wanted this bridge. They had fought and bled for it. They would not give it up so easily. They had shown their hand with the missile. What else were they hiding? What other surprises were waiting in the burning town of Harmony Creek? The tank stopped in the middle of the bridge, its cannon pointed down Main Street like a silent accusation. It was a challenge, a dare. And Thorne knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the enemy was about to answer. The silence that had fallen over the town was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a predator gathering itself to strike. The first part of the battle was over. But the real war, he was beginning to realize, had only just begun. And the unassuming woman in the 50-ton tank held the key. But what she didn't know, what none of them could possibly know, was that the enemy wasn't just in front of them. They were already behind the lines. The silence on the bridge was a living thing. It pressed in on them, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the crackle of distant fires and the low, hungry hum of the Abrams turbine engine. Inside the cramped, steel-walled cockpit, the air was thick with the smell of ozone, hot metal, and the faint, coppery scent of fear. Sergeant Anya Sharma gripped the commander's controls, her knuckles white. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden quiet. She had done it. She had taken out the machine gun nest and broken the siege. But the silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. It was the silence of a held breath, of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Her crew, 2 young guardsmen barely out of their teens, were looking at her with a mixture of awe and terror. There was Corporal Miller, her driver, a farm boy with hands so big they seemed to swallow the twin steering yokes, and Private Evans, her gunner, a college kid who joined the Guard for the tuition money and now found himself on the front line of a war he didn't understand. They were good kids, loyal and brave, but they were green. They had followed her out here on faith, and now she had to make sure that faith wasn't misplaced. Status report, she said, her voice tight, trying to project a calm she did not feel. Engine is green. All systems nominal, Miller reported, his voice a squeak higher than usual. Gun is hot and ready, Sergeant, Evans added, his eyes glued to the thermal sight. But I don't see anything. It's like they just vanished. Anya scanned the street through her own periscope, the magnification doing little to pierce the thick, oily smoke. Evans was right. The street was empty. The windows of the buildings were dark, lifeless eyes. There were no muzzle flashes, no movement, nothing. It was wrong. Utterly, terrifyingly wrong. An enemy this disciplined, this well-equipped, didn't just run away. They repositioned. They adapted. They set traps. Her radio crackled. It was Thorne. Sharma, what the hell was that? That defensive system is not standard issue. Talk to me. His voice was a low growl, the arrogance replaced by a grudging, demanding curiosity. Anya hesitated. The system he was talking about was codenamed Aegis. It was the reason she was here, in this specific tank, in this specific town. It was the life's work of her father, Dr. Ari Sharma, a brilliant but disgraced DARPA scientist who had poured his soul into creating a revolutionary active protection system. He had believed it would make armored vehicles all but invincible. But the project had been sabotaged, deemed a failure, and her father had been cast out, his reputation ruined. He had hidden the only working prototype in the one place no one would ever think to look, the belly of a forgotten museum piece in a sleepy National Guard armory. It was his last, desperate gamble to prove his work had not been in vain. And now, it was a secret to keep. It's a custom upgrade, Lieutenant Commander, she said, choosing her words carefully. Let's just say this old girl has a few tricks up her sleeve. Tricks? Thorne's voice was sharp with suspicion. Sergeant, I don't have time for games. What else are you not telling me? Before she could answer, a new voice cut across the channel. It was Reaper, one of the SEALs. Ours, we've got a problem. The civilians, they're not at the town hall. The place is empty. And there's something else. There are bodies. But they're not civilians. They're first sons. Looks like they were executed. Single shot to the back of the head. Anya felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This changed everything. The entire premise of their mission, holding the bridge for a civilian evacuation, was a lie. They had been drawn here. The SEALs, the Guard, her tank, they had all been lured to this bridge for a reason. But what was it? It's a trap, she whispered, more to herself than to her crew. "What was that, Sergeant?" Miller asked, his voice trembling slightly. "They wanted us on this bridge," she said, her mind racing, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The sophisticated weaponry, the coordinated attack, the missing civilians, the executions. This wasn't a militia. This was a professional hit squad, and they were here for something specific. Something in this town. Or something that was supposed to cross this bridge. Her eyes fell on a large, unmarked convoy truck that had been abandoned near the town square, visible through a gap in the smoke. It was out of place, too large and modern for this small town. It had been there since the fighting started, ignored in the chaos. But now, seeing it through the lens of this new information, it looked significant. "Evans," she ordered, her voice sharp and clear. "Lay the main gun on that white truck in the square. Do not fire, just target it." "Roger that," Evans replied, his hands moving deftly over the controls. The turret whirred as it adjusted its aim. "I have a lock." "Thorne," Anya said into the radio, her decision made. "The mission is a bust. The civilians are gone. We've been set up. I think the real target is a convoy truck in the town square. I'm going in." "Negative, Sergeant." Thorne's voice was thunderous. "You will hold your position on that bridge. That is a direct order. We need to regroup and assess." "With all due respect, Lieutenant Commander," Anya shot back, her patience finally snapping. "Your assessment got one of your men shot and the rest of us pinned down in a kill zone. I'm done waiting for a plan. I'm making one." Without waiting for a reply, she cut the channel. "Miller, forward. Get me to that truck." "But Sergeant, the bridge," Miller stammered. "Is a cage," Anya finished for him. "And I'm not going to sit in it and wait for them to slaughter us. Move." The Abrams lurched forward, its treads clattering on the concrete as it rolled off the bridge and onto Main Street. The decision was terrifying, a leap into the unknown. She was disobeying a direct order from a SEAL commander. She was taking her crew, her father's legacy, into the heart of the fire, based on nothing more than a gut feeling. But every instinct in her body was screaming that the truck was the KEY as they moved down the street. The silence was broken by a new, chilling sound. It was music. A soft, lilting melody from an old-fashioned ice cream truck, of all things. The cheerful, innocent tune was a grotesque counterpoint to the surrounding destruction. It was coming from a side alley, just ahead. "What the hell is that?" Evans whispered, his voice filled with a childlike dread. "It's a lure," Anya said, her hands tightening on her controls. "They're trying to draw us in." "Miller, slow down." "Evans, scan that alley." "Thermal." "I see it," Evans said a moment later, his voice dropping. "The ice cream truck. There's a heat signature inside. A big one. Too big to be a person. It's a bomb. A massive IED." Anya's blood ran cold. It was a classic ambush. Lure the heavy armor into a narrow street, then hit it with a massive explosive from the side, where its armor was weakest. Even with the Aegis system, a blast that big, that close, could cripple them, or worse. "Miller, stop," she commanded. The tank ground to a halt. They were exposed, sitting ducks in the middle of Main Street. The cheerful music continued its relentless, maddening tune. It was a taunt. "Adair, they know we are here," Miller said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're watching us." Anya knew he was right. They were being toyed with. The enemy wasn't just trying to kill them. They were trying to break them psychologically, to make them second-guess every move, to fill them with a dread that was more corrosive than any bullet. She looked at the alley, then at the convoy truck, still 100 yards away. They were caught between a bomb and a mystery. "We can't stay here," Evans said, his panic rising. "Sergeant, what do we do?" Anya closed her eyes for a second, forcing herself to think. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, a phrase he had repeated to her over and over during their late night sessions in the garage, working on the Aegis prototype. "Never fight their fight, Anya. Make them fight yours. Change the battlefield." She opened her eyes, a new resolve hardening her features. "They expect us to either charge forward into the trap or retreat back to the bridge. We are going to do neither." She took a deep breath. "Miller," she said, her voice low and steady. See the wall of that antique shop on our right? Yeah, I see it. Drive through it. There was a moment of stunned silence from the driver's compartment. Sergeant. You heard me, Corporal. They've turned the street into a kill zone. So we are getting off the street. Make a new door. It was a crazy idea. A reckless, desperate gamble. But it was also brilliant. It was the one thing the enemy would never anticipate. Miller's hesitation lasted only a second before he was replaced by the farm boy who knew how to handle heavy machinery. Yes, Sergeant, he said, a grin evident in his voice. My pleasure. The Abrams engine roared as Miller spun. The tank 90 degrees. The massive vehicle slammed into the brick wall of the antique shop with the force of a wrecking ball. The wall exploded inward in a shower of brick, plaster, and shattered porcelain. The tank plunged into the darkness of the shop, the sound of crushing furniture and tinkling glass a chaotic symphony under its treads. For a moment, they were blind, surrounded by the dust and debris of a century of forgotten treasures. Then, they were through. They smashed out the back wall of the shop and emerged into the alley behind it, a narrow, garbage-strewn corridor that ran parallel to Main Street. They had bypassed the bomb. They had changed the battlefield. Anya felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. As they rumbled down the alley, a new threat emerged. A team of First Sons, caught by surprise, opened up on them from the rooftop of the adjacent building. Rifle fire hammered against their top armor, the weakest point on the tank. Gunner. Rooftop, 12 o'clock. Anya yelled, but before Evans could react, one of the enemy soldiers leaned over the edge of the roof, a dark object in his hand. It wasn't a grenade. It was something else. A small, black device that he slapped onto the top of their turret. It clung there, held by a powerful magnet. A red light on the device began to blink, slowly at first, then faster and faster. What is that thing? Miller shouted over the intercom. Anya knew exactly what it was. It was a plasma charge, another piece of exotic, high-tech weaponry. It wouldn't explode. It would melt. It would burn through the tank's armor like a hot knife through butter, flooding the crew compartment with molten metal and superheated gas. The Aegis system was designed to stop projectiles. It could do nothing against a device that was already attached to their hull. They had seconds to live. The blinking red light was a frantic, accelerating heartbeat, counting down the last moments of their lives. Anya's mind raced, desperately searching for a solution, for any way out. But there was none. They were trapped. The enemy had outmaneuvered them. She looked at the blinking light, at the faces of her young crew reflected in the dim glow of the instrument panels, and a cold, terrible certainty washed over her. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of glory on the bridge, but here, in a filthy back alley, cooked alive in their own machine. The blinking light was a blur now, the sound of the beeping a high-pitched, continuous scream. Any second now. Any second, but then, just as she braced for the end, a new voice, calm and eerily familiar, crackled in her headset. It wasn't Thorne. It wasn't her crew. It was a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years. A voice she thought she would never hear again. Don't worry, Anya, the voice said, as if it were right there in the tank with her. I'm not going to let them hurt you. After all, you're leading them right to me. It was the voice of her father. The voice echoed in the claustrophobic confines of the tank, a ghost from a past Anya thought she had buried. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The blinking plasma charge, the enemy on the rooftop, the entire war outside there. Steel hull, it all faded away, replaced by the impossible, unmistakable sound of her father. Dr. Ari Sharma. The brilliant, broken man who had vanished 5 years ago, leaving behind nothing but a ruined career, a mountain of debt, and a daughter with a universe of unanswered questions. Dad. The word was a choked whisper, a child's cry in the dark. No time for a reunion, my dear, his voice replied, impossibly calm, laced with an unnerving mixture of warmth and detachment. The device on your roof is one of mine. A little something I call a can opener. But don't worry, I've included a back door. Stand by. Before Anya could process the tidal wave of confusion and betrayal, a high-pitched squeal erupted. From the plasma charge, the blinking red light turned a steady green, and the device went inert. On the rooftop above, the First Son soldiers stared in disbelief, their perfect trap inexplicably disarmed. What just happened? Evans stammered, His finger still frozen on the trigger of the coaxial gun, Anya couldn't answer. Her mind was a maelstrom. Her father was alive. He was here, somewhere in this war-torn town. And he was connected. To the enemy, to their advanced technology. The can-opener, he'd called it. One of mine. The implication was a physical blow. The weapons being used against them, the weapons that had killed American soldiers, were his creations, her father's. Voice returned, pulling her from her shock. You've been very clever, Anya. Bypassing the IED, using the alley. You always did see the board differently. Just like me. Now, I need you to continue to that convoy truck. It contains the final component for my work. Bring it to me. Bring it to you. Anya's voice was raw, shaking with a fury that was rapidly eclipsing her confusion. You're with them? The First Sons? They are killing people. They shot Phantom. Sacrifices are necessary for progress, Anya. You, of all people, should understand that, he said, his tone patient, as if explaining a complex equation to a slow student. The world is a corrupt, dying institution, ruled by the very men who destroyed my work, who destroyed our family. The First Sons share my vision of a new world order, one built on strength and technological superiority. What you see as chaos is merely the birth pangs of a new era. The monstrous, self-serving logic of it stole her breath. He wasn't a prisoner. He was their leader. Or worse, their prophet. The man who had taught her about honor and duty was now justifying murder. The convoy truck, it wasn't the enemy's target. It was their prize. And she was the unwitting delivery girl. No, she said, the word a stone in her throat. Whatever you're planning, I'm stopping it. Right here. Right now. A soft, sad chuckle echoed in her headset. Oh, Anya. So brave. So naive. You can't stop it. But you can still be a part of it. Join me. Together, we can finish what we started. Think of it. Your tactical skill, my technology. We would be unstoppable. The offer hung in the air, a poisonous temptation. For a fleeting, shameful moment, she felt the pull of it. The desire to have her father back, to be a part of something. Great again, to punish the world that had cast them both aside. But then she saw the face of Corporal Miller, pale and terrified in the dim light. She thought of the SEALs, bleeding on the bridge. She thought of the town she had sworn to protect. Never, she snarled. I was afraid you'd say that. Her father replied, the warmth gone from his voice, replaced by a chillingly familiar tone of disappointment. Very well. Have it your way. The connection went dead. Sergeant, what's going on? Miller pleaded. Who was that? Trouble, Anya said, her voice hard as steel. The man in charge. Evans, clear that roof. Miller, get us back to Main Street. We are not delivering that truck. We are destroying it. The crew, sensing the shift in their commander, didn't hesitate. Evans opened up with the coaxial gun, a torrent of lead that sent the shocked First Son soldiers scrambling for cover. Miller threw the Abrams into a hard reverse, backing out of the alley and smashing through the front of a dry cleaner's, emerging back onto the main thoroughfare. The battlefield had changed. This was no longer a rescue mission or a defensive stand. It was personal. Her mission was no longer just to save the town. It was to stop her father. To dismantle the terrible legacy he was trying to build on a foundation of blood and fire. As they rumbled toward the town square, the enemy, no longer toying with them, unleashed their full fury. The quiet streets erupted. Windows shattered as RPG teams opened up from the surrounding buildings. Heavy machine guns, repositioned from the ruined clock tower, began to hammer at their armor. The First Sons were no longer trying to hurt them. They were trying to annihilate them. Aegis is taking hits. Multiple impacts. Evans shouted as the air around the tank shimmered with the blue-white flashes of the defensive system intercepting rocket-propelled grenades. The system was a miracle, but it wasn't invincible. Each interception drained its power core. It could not last forever. Ignore them. Anya commanded, her eyes locked on the white convoy truck, now just 50 yards away. Just get us to the target. They were crawling through a hurricane of fire. The noise was deafening, a constant, brutal roar of explosions and impacts. The tank shuddered with each hit, the steel groaning in protest. A red light flashed on Anya's console. power fluctuations in the Aegis system. Miller yelled over. The din, it's overloading. Almost there. Anya urged him on. They reached the edge of the town square and skidded to a halt behind the stone base of a Civil War monument. The convoy truck was directly in front of them, its rear doors. Tantalizingly close. Evans, load Sabo round, Anya ordered. An armor-piercing Sabo round would punch through the truck and destroy whatever was inside without causing a massive explosion that could level the whole square. Loading Sabo, he confirmed. The autoloader clanked as it rammed the long, thin dart of a round into the breech. Ready. On my mark, Anya said, taking a breath. Fire. The cannon bucked, the sound inside the tank a violent, metallic crack. The round screamed across the square, but it never reached its target. Halfway to the truck, the Sabo round was met by a shimmering, invisible wall of energy. It struck the barrier with a flash of intense light and was instantly deflected, tumbling harmlessly into the facade of the town's bank, which collapsed in a cloud of dust. Anya stared in disbelief. What was that? Another Aegis system. Before anyone could answer, the rear doors of the convoy truck swung open. Bathed in the eerie glow of internal lights stood a machine that did not belong in this world. It was a quadrupedal drone, about the size of a large dog, sleek and black, with no discernible weapons. It looked more like a piece of advanced robotics than a weapon of war. It stepped out of the truck, its metal feet clicking on the asphalt with an unnerving delicacy. Then, the air around it began to warp, and the drone vanished. Where did it go? Evans yelled, frantically scanning the square with his thermal sights. I've lost it. It's gone. It's a cloaking device, Anya breathed, the realization dawning on her. Her father had done it. He had perfected active camouflage. It was the stuff of science fiction. Thorne's voice suddenly blasted through her headset, overriding her internal comms. Sharma, what in the name of God is that thing? My men are seeing a ghost. It's tearing them apart. Anya switched her view to the bridgehead camera. The image was chaos. The SEALs were firing wildly, their muzzle flashes illuminating a scene of pure terror. One of them was down, his body contorted at an unnatural angle. Another was screaming, clutching a leg that was no longer there. They were fighting an enemy. They couldn't see. The drone, a shimmering distortion in the air, was moving among them with terrifying speed and precision, cutting them down one by one. It wasn't using bullets or explosives. It was using some kind of focused energy blade, a silent, deadly scalpel that sliced through flesh and bone with contemptuous ease. This was her father's vision. This was his new world order. Not soldiers fighting soldiers, but an invisible, unstoppable machine slaughtering human beings who had no way to fight back. The horror of it was absolute. Fall back. Thorne, get your men out of there. Anya screamed into the radio. We can't, he yelled back, his voice strained with the sounds of battle. We are pinned. It's too fast. Anya knew he was right. They couldn't outrun it. They couldn't fight it. But she had to do something. She looked at the drone, a faint ripple in the air, as it prepared to strike another SEAL. Then she looked at her tank, at the smoking cannon, at the depleting power of the Aegis system. Her father's words came back to her. Change the battlefield. A desperate, insane idea began to form in her mind. It was a 1 in a million shot, a maneuver. So reckless it bordered on suicidal. But it was the only chance they had. Miller, she said, her voice eerily calm. Get us on the bridge. As fast as this old girl will go. Sergeant. Just do it, she said. Evans, keep your eyes on that shimmer. Track it for me. Don't lose it, no matter what. The Abrams roared to life, spinning on its treads, and charging toward the bridge. The drone, its work with the SEALs apparently finished for the moment, turned its attention to the much larger threat. It bounded after them, a silent, invisible predator easily keeping pace with the charging tank. They thundered onto the bridge, the scene of their first victory. The burning cars, the dead First Sun soldiers, the wounded SEALs taking cover. It was a tableau of their failure. The drone was gaining on them. Anya could see the shimmer in her periscope, just off their rear quarter. It's almost on us, Sergeant. Miller shouted. I know, Anya said. Keep going straight. Don't stop for anything. They were halfway across the bridge now. The drone was right behind them, preparing to leap onto their engine deck. Anya took one last look at the tactical display. The bridge's structural integrity sensors, a feature of the town's emergency response network she had studied, were flashing red. The bridge was already damaged from the earlier fighting. It wouldn't take much more now, Miller. She screamed. Hard left. The corporal didn't question the insane order. He yanked the steering yoke hard over. The 50-ton tank, moving at nearly 40 miles an hour, swerved violently. The massive steel machine protested, its right tread lifting completely off the ground. For a terrifying second, Anya thought they were going to flip. But the tank held. It slammed sideways into the concrete guardrail of the bridge. The guardrail exploded. Concrete and rebar shattered under the immense impact. The tank teetered on the edge, half on the bridge, half over the churning waters of Sycamore Creek 50 feet below. The invisible drone, caught completely by surprise by the tank's sudden, impossible maneuver, couldn't stop in time. It leaped, expecting to land on the tank's rear deck, but instead, it sailed past them, its cloaking field flickering for a split second as it passed through the cloud of concrete dust. In that instant, Anya saw it clearly, a mechanical nightmare of black steel and glowing red optics that IT soared out over the empty space where the guardrail had been. For a moment, it seemed to hang in the air, its powerful legs churning, trying to find purchase on nothing. Then, gravity took over. With a final, silent flicker of its cloaking field, the multi-million-dollar ghost, her father's perfect killing machine, plunged into the creek below. It hit the water with a surprisingly small splash and was gone. The tank groaned, the sound of tortured metal echoing across the bridge. It was balanced precariously on the edge, threatening to follow the drone into the abyss. Miller, back us. Up. Anya yelled. Gently. Gently. With painstaking slowness, Miller eased the tank back from the brink. The left tread bit into the asphalt, and with a final, shuddering lurch, the Abrams pulled itself fully back onto the bridge. They were safe. For now, they had done it. They had defeated the invisible enemy. But the cost had been immense. The bridge was critically damaged. The tank was battered. And the SEAL team. Anya didn't want to think about the SEAL team. But the worst part was the chilling realization that this was just a taste of her father's power. He had sacrificed his most advanced weapon just to test them. He was watching, learning, adapting. And he was still out there, in the burning town, with the rest of his stolen technology and his army of fanatics. The fight for the bridge was over. But the hunt for her father had just begun. And as she looked at the smoke-choked streets of Harmony Creek, she knew that to stop him, she would have to drive her tank, her father's legacy, straight into the heart of the darkness he had created. The only question was whether she, or any of them, would come out alive. The silence that followed the drone's demise was heavier than before, filled with the ghosts of the men it had cut down. Through her periscope, Anya watched as Lieutenant Commander Thorne, his face a mask of grim disbelief, knelt beside one of his fallen men. The invincible SEALs, the tip of the spear, had been shattered by an enemy they couldn't even see. The cost of her father's progress was laid bare on the blood-stained concrete of the Sycamore Creek Bridge. Sergeant Sharma, Thorne's voice came over the radio, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. It was hollow, ragged. Report. The drone is neutralized, Anya replied, her own voice flat, mechanical. She felt a profound, soul-deep weariness settle over her. It's in the creek. But the bridge is compromised. We hit it hard. I don't know how much more it can take. We are not going anywhere, Thorne said. We have 2 KIA, 3 wounded, 1 critical. We are combat ineffective. The bridge is our only defensible position. He paused, the sound of his breathing heavy in her ear. That thing, it knew our every move. It anticipated us. They have our comms. They have our playbook. Anya knew he was right. The drone hadn't just been fast and invisible. It had been smart, tactically brilliant. It had flanked them, isolated them, and struck at their weakest points with surgical precision. It was as if it knew their training, their protocols, their very thoughts. It wasn't the drone, Anya said, the terrible certainty crystallizing in her mind. The drone was just the weapon. Someone was guiding it. Someone who knows how we operate. A traitor. The word hung unspoken between them. It was the only explanation. The First Sons hadn't just come with advanced technology. They had come with inside information. Someone had sold them out, my father. Anya began, the words tasting like ash. He's the one who built that tech. He's leading them. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She could picture Thorne, processing the information, the betrayal of a decorated scientist, turning his genius against his own country. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, hard as flint. Then your mission has changed, Sergeant. You're no longer a mechanic. You're a hunter. Find him. End this. It wasn't a request. It was an absolution. An unofficial order that cut through all the red tape and protocol. He was giving her carte blanche. He was trusting her. The man who had dismissed her as a grease monkey was now pinning the survival of his remaining men and the fate of this town on her. What about you? She asked. We'll hold this bridge, he said, his voice regaining a sliver of its old command. We'll be your rearguard. We'll buy you the time you need. But Sharma, do not fail. The line went dead. The weight of his trust was heavier than the 50-ton tank around her. You heard the man, she said to her crew, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. We are going hunting. Hunting what, Sergeant? Miller asked, his farm boy. Innocence clashing with the grim reality of their situation. A ghost, Anya replied. Miller, get us off this bridge. Take us to the old textile mill on the east side of town. If my father is anywhere, it's there. It's the only place with a power grid strong enough to run his equipment. The Abrams, battered but not broken, reversed off the bridge and plunged back into the smoke-filled streets of Harmony Creek. The town was quieter now. The sporadic gunfire had died down. It was an eerie, unnatural calm. The First Sons were regrouping, licking their wounds, and preparing for the next phase of their plan. They had lost their ace in the hole, but Anya knew her father. He was not a man who relied on a single plan. He would have contingencies, backups, other horrors waiting in the wings as they navigated the debris-strewn streets. Anya's mind raced. How could she find him? How could she fight him? He knew her, every bit as well as she knew him. He had taught her to play chess, to think 10 moves ahead. He had taught her engineering, the very mechanics of the machine she now commanded. He would anticipate her every move. To beat him, she would have to do something he could never predict. She would have to be not just a soldier, but a daughter. She would have to use his own love for her, twisted as it had become, against him. A sudden, jarring impact shook the tank, throwing them against their restraints. What was that? Evans yelled, roadblock. Miller shouted back. They've dragged a city bus across the street. Anya looked through the periscope. A massive public bus blocked the road ahead, its windows shattered, its frame twisted. It was another trap. But this one felt different. It was too obvious, too clumsy for her father. Hold position, she ordered. Evans scanned the area. High explosive round, ready. Scanning, the gunner replied, his voice tense. I see movement. Second floor, department store. Multiple targets. They're setting up another ambush. It was too easy. They were practically announcing their position. Her father was a grandmaster of chess, not a checkers player. This was a feint, a distraction. But from what? Her eyes were drawn to a flicker of movement in a reflection in the department store's large plate glass window. It wasn't a soldier. It was something else. A civilian. A woman, clutching a child, huddled in the doorway of a bakery across the street. They were terrified, trapped between the roadblock and whatever was coming next. The civilians. The ones who were supposed to have been evacuated. The ones the SEALs had reported missing from the town hall. They hadn't been evacuated. They had been herded. Used as bait. It's not an ambush, Anya said, the cold, sickening realization washing over her. It's a stage. They want us to see this. As if on cue, a spotlight, mounted on the roof of the department store, flared to life, illuminating the mother and child in a harsh, white glare. Then, a figure stepped out of the shadows beside them. He was tall and wore the black combat gear of the First Sons, but he was unmasked. He had a cruel, sneering face and a pistol in his hand. A voice, not her father's, but a younger, more arrogant one, crackled over the open emergency channel. Sergeant Sharma, we know who you are. We know who your father is. He is a great man, a visionary, but his sentimentality for you has become a liability. The council has decided to streamline the operation. The man in the street raised his pistol and pointed it at the head of the crying child. "You have a choice, Sergeant," the voice on the radio continued. "Destroy your tank, your father's precious Aegis system, and surrender. Or watch these innocent people pay the price for your defiance. You have 60 seconds. A clock appeared on the large digital billboard in the town square, its red numbers beginning to count down from 1 minute. It was a monstrous, impossible choice. Her father's legacy, the only thing that could stop his larger plan, versus the lives of a mother and child. This was the work of the traitor, she realized. This cruel, brutish tactic was not her father's style. This was someone else, someone who had seized control of the operation. Someone who knew that the one thing her father could never bring himself to do was harm her directly. "Sergeant, what are we going to do?" Evans pleaded, his voice cracking. He was watching the scene through the gunner's sight, a front row. Seat to the horror. Anya's mind was a whirlwind of tactical calculations and raw, human emotion. They couldn't shoot the man without hitting the civilians. They couldn't charge the roadblock in time. They were trapped, forced to play a game where every outcome was a loss. 45 seconds, she looked at the faces of her crew. Miller, his jaw set, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for her to do something. Evans, tears streaming down his face, his hand shaking on the firing controls. They were looking to her for an answer, for a miracle. 30 seconds, she thought of Thorne. And his men, bleeding on the bridge, counting on her. She thought of her father, of the good man he had once been, and the monster he had become. He had created this technology to save lives, and now it was being used to threaten them. 15 seconds. There was no good choice. No tactical solution. No clever maneuver. There was only sacrifice. "Evans," she said, her voice a dead, hollow thing. "Target the bus. High explosive round." "But the civilians," he sobbed. "Do it," she commanded, her voice breaking. "That's an order." Reluctantly, the gunner laid the crosshairs on the center of the bus. 10 seconds. "I'm sorry," Anya whispered to the woman and child she was about to condemn. 5.4.3, she closed her eyes. 2, "Fire," she whispered, but the roar of the main gun did not come. Instead, a new sound filled the air. The sharp, unmistakable crack of a high-powered sniper rifle. Anya's eyes snapped open. In the street, the first son's soldier crumpled to the ground, a neat, dark hole in the center of his forehead. The mother grabbed her child and scrambled back into the safety of the bakery. "What happened?" Miller gasped. Anya scanned the rooftops, her heart pounding. There, on the roof of the library, 2 blocks away, was a lone figure with a rifle. It was too far to make out any details, but she knew. She knew who it was. Thorne's voice came over the radio, calm and steady. "Phantom's back in the fight. He's got your back, Sharma. Now, what are your orders?" The relief was so intense. It almost buckled her. Phantom, the SEAL who had been wounded, the man she thought was out of the fight, had saved them. He had disobeyed Thorne's order to hold the bridge and had moved to support her. The SEALs, the professionals, were not her rivals. They were her allies, but the reprieve was momentary. The digital billboard in the square flickered, the countdown clock replaced by a new image. It was a live feed from inside the textile mill. It showed her father, Ari Sharma, strapped to a chair. The arrogant young commander who had been on. The radio stood over him, a pistol to his head. "You think you've won, Sergeant," the voice sneered. "You've only made things worse. Your father's usefulness has come to an end. But his technology is still mine. I have what I need from the convoy. The final component. In 10 minutes, I will activate the masterstroke, an EMP pulse that will wipe out the entire eastern seaboard's power grid. It will be the dawn of our new era. And you will not be there to see it." The image on the screen showed a complex device, pulsing with a sickly green light. It was attached to the mill's primary power conduit. "This is your last chance, Anya," the trader's voice said. "A daughter's choice. Your father or the world." The feed cut out, replaced once again by the countdown clock. But this time, it was counting down from 10 minutes. The tank was hit. A massive explosion on their left side, more powerful than an RPG, rocked the Abrams, sending it skidding sideways. It wasn't a projectile. It was a mine. A sophisticated, remote detonated mine. They had been sitting in a minefield, and the enemy had just sprung the trap. "Left track is gone." Miller screamed. We are immobilized. Anya looked at her console. Red lights were flashing everywhere. The engine was stalling. They were a sitting duck. And on the billboard, the clock was ticking down. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The enemy began to emerge from the buildings, swarming toward them. They weren't firing. They were just advancing. A black tide of soldiers, their victory assured. They knew the tank was crippled. They knew time was on their side. Anya looked at the textile mill in the distance, then at the advancing enemy. They were trapped. Her father was about to be executed. And in less than 10 minutes, the world as they knew it would go dark. She had come so far, fought so hard, only to be brought down by a simple mine. She grabbed her radio. Thorn. They've got my father. They're going to trigger an EMP. The mill. You have to stop them. We are on our way, he responded, his voice grim. But we won't make it in time. You're the only one who can. I can't, she yelled back, desperation creeping into her voice. We are crippled. We are not going anywhere. The first of the First Sun soldiers reached the tank, his smug face peering in through her periscope view. He tapped on the glass, a mocking little gesture, then raised his rifle to shatter the lens. This was it. The end of the line. They had failed, but as the soldier's face filled her view, Anya's eyes were drawn to something behind him. A reflection in the shattered window of a car. It was a flicker of blue light from the tank's undercarriage. It was the emergency power conduit for the Aegis system. The mine had damaged the track, but it had also, miraculously, exposed the one part of the tank that was still drawing immense power from the core. An idea, born of pure, unadulterated desperation, exploded in her mind. It was beyond reckless. It was impossible. It was their only shot. Miller. Evans, she shouted, her voice electric with a terrifying, exhilarating new plan. Get ready for a rough ride. We are not done yet. The world outside the tank had become a sea of black-clad soldiers. They swarmed over the crippled Abrams, their boots clanging on the hull, their fists hammering on the hatches. They were laughing, confident, savoring their victory before going in for the kill. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of defeat and the rising panic of her crew. They're trying to pry open the hatches. Miller yelled, his voice strained. What do we do, Sergeant? Anya ignored him. Her focus was absolute, narrowed, to the single, insane plan that had ignited in her mind. She was looking at the power schematics on her secondary display, her fingers flying across the control panel, rerouting energy, bypassing safety protocols, pushing the tanks damaged systems to their absolute limit. The reflection she had seen, the exposed Aegis power conduit, was their only weapon left. Evans, give me a damage report on the main gun's elevation system, she said, her voice unnervingly calm. It's fried, Sergeant, the gunner replied, his voice trembling. We took a hit from the mine. The cannon is stuck. We can't raise or lower it. I know, Anya said. What's its current elevation? Evans checked his display. It's at -5 degrees. It's pointing at the ground. Anya allowed herself a grim smile. Perfect. She took a deep breath. All right, listen to me. Both of you. What we're about to do has never been done before. It's not in any manual. If my calculations are wrong, we are going to blow ourselves to kingdom come. Do you understand? There was a moment of silence, then two quiet, determined replies. Yes, Sergeant. Good, she said, because we've got about 7 minutes to save the world. She toggled the open emergency channel. You wanted my father's technology. She broadcast to the men swarming her tank. You're about to get it. With a final keystroke, she completed the bypass. She rerouted the entire energy reserve from the Aegis defense system, a system designed to create a protective shield, directly into the firing capacitor of the main cannon. It was a move of pure, suicidal desperation. The cannon wasn't designed to handle that kind of energy. It was like trying to force a river through a garden hose. The tank began to hum, a low, ominous vibration that grew into a deep, resonant thrum. The lights in the cockpit flickered wildly. On the outside, the exposed power conduit began to glow with a brilliant, unholy blue light. The First Sun soldiers on the hull backed away, their laughter dying in their throats as they sensed the immense power building within the machine they thought they had killed. Capacitor is charged, Evans reported, his voice a mixture of terror and awe. Sergeant, the whole system is redlining. It's going to overload. It's not an overload, Anya corrected him, her eyes fixed on the countdown clock on the distant billboard. 6 minutes. It's a controlled detonation. Miller, on my mark, I want you to engage the neutral steer, left side only. It's going to spin us in place. But the left track is gone. The drive wheel is still there, Anya countered. It will be enough. Get ready. She watched the enemy soldiers, who were now in a full, panicked retreat, scrambling to get away from the glowing, thrumming tank. They were clearing a perfect circle around them. 0.5 minutes. Thorne's voice crackled in her ear. Sharma, what are you doing? Changing the battlefield, Lieutenant Commander, she replied. She took one last look at the textile mill, at the place where her father was being held. Then she looked at the faces of her young crew, their eyes wide, their trust in her absolute. She would not let them down. Now, Miller, she screamed. Miller slammed the control for the neutral steer. The tank's right track remained locked, but the drive wheel on the damaged left side roared to life. The massive, 50-ton machine began to pivot on the spot, its cannon, still locked at a -5-degree elevation, carving a circle in the asphalt around them. Now, Evans. Anya yelled. Fire. Evans jammed his thumb down on the firing stud. It wasn't the familiar boom of the main cannon. It was a sound that ripped the sky apart. A deafening, high-frequency shriek as a billion joules of pure, raw energy, the entire defensive power of the Aegis system, was unleashed through the barrel. But because the cannon was aimed at the ground, the blast didn't go outward. It went downward. A blinding arc of blue-white energy, a contained lightning strike, slammed into the street. It vaporized the asphalt, superheating the ground beneath. The resulting explosion was not one of fire, but of pure kinetic force. The street erupted. The entire tank was thrown into the air like a child's toy, lifted by the sheer, unimaginable power of the blast it had just unleashed. For a terrifying, weightless second, they were flying. Then they came crashing down, 10 feet from where they had started, with a bone-jarring impact that shattered every display and threw the crew against their harnesses. The tank was dead. The power was gone. The cockpit was plunged into absolute darkness and silence, but they had moved. They had used the cannon's recoil, amplified 1,000 times by the Aegis energy, as a form of propulsion. A single, violent, 50-ton jump, and they had landed with their front armor facing the textile mill, their path now clear of the bus and the minefield. Anya, her head ringing, her body screaming in protest, unstrapped herself. We are out, she croaked, her voice hoarse. Let's go. She kicked open the commander's hatch and scrambled out into the smoke-filled air. Miller and Evans were right behind her, armed with their service rifles. The scene around them was one of utter devastation. The first Sun soldiers who had been too close were gone, vaporized. The others were scattered, stunned, their command structure shattered by the impossible event they had just witnessed. Thorne, we are out of the tank and on foot, heading for the mill, Anya said into her personal radio. The EMP device is our primary target. We see you, he replied. We are moving to support. Phantom is providing overwatch. Go, Sharma. Go. The three of them ran, sprinting across the torn-up square, their boots crunching on shattered pavement. They were no longer a tank crew. They were infantry, exposed and vulnerable. But they were moving. They reached the mill, a sprawling brick complex, and smashed their way in through a side door. The inside was a maze of machinery and catwalks. In the center of the main floor, they saw it, the EMP device, pulsing with green light, and the traitorous commander standing beside it, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Her father was still strapped to the chair, a pained but proud look in his eyes. You, the commander screamed, raising his pistol. You're insane. He fired, but his shot went wide as a bullet from above shattered his shoulder. He cried out in pain and stumbled back. It was Phantom, firing through a skylight. It's over, Anya said, her rifle leveled at his chest. Shut it down. The commander laughed, a gurgling, bloody sound. You're too late. He held up a detonator. This isn't just a trigger. It's a dead man's switch. If my heart stops, the pulse goes off. You can't win. He was right. They couldn't shoot him. They were in another stalemate. The clock on the device read 90 seconds. Anya, her father's voice, was weak but clear. The device, it has a failsafe, a manual override, but it's keyed to my biometric signature. Only I can shut it down. The commander sneered. And he's not going anywhere. Anya looked at her father, strapped to the chair, then at the commander, his finger on the switch that could kill him and doom the world. Her mind raced, searching for a third option, for a move he would never see coming, and then she saw it. Not on the battlefield, but in her father's eyes. A look of apology, of sacrifice, of love. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, a sudden dread washing over her. "What I should have done 5 years ago," Ari Sharma said, his voice filled with a lifetime of regret. "Protecting my legacy. My real legacy." He looked at his daughter, his eyes shining with tears. "You, Anya. It was always you." Then, with a strength she didn't know he possessed, he threw his body backward. The chair he was strapped to toppled over with a crash. It wasn't a random act. He fell with purpose, directing his head toward the sharp, exposed corner of a steel control panel. The impact was sickening. The commander screamed in rage, realizing what was happening a second too late. Ari Sharma had not tried to escape. He had taken his own life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the commander's eyes went wide with horror as he looked at the detonator in his hand. The dead man's switch. It was armed. His own trap was about to spring on him. He fumbled with it, trying to disarm it, but it was too late. A small, almost insignificant click echoed in the vast room, and the C4 charge built into the detonator, a final, spiteful failsafe, exploded. The blast was small, but at point-blank range, it was devastating. The commander was gone. The room was silent, save for the hum of the EMP device. The clock read 30 seconds. Anya ran to her father. He was gone. But in his hand, held tight, was a small, silver key. She recognized it instantly. It was the key to the footlocker where he kept his old research notes, the one he always said contained his most important secrets. She looked at the key, then at the pulsing device. There was no time. She had to choose. His secrets, the answers she had craved for years, or the world. There was no choice at all. She ran to the EMP device. The manual override was a small panel requiring a 5-digit code. She had no idea what it was. She tried his birthday. Nothing. His lab number. Nothing. 20 seconds. She was frantic, her mind blank with grief and panic. Then his last words echoed in her head. "My real legacy. You, Anya." Her birthday. She punched in the numbers. 0-8-1-7-9. August the 17th, 1999. The panel flashed green. A large red button was revealed. Manual override. 10 seconds. She slammed her hand down on the button. The green pulsing light on the device sputtered and died. The low hum faded into silence. The clock stopped at 0:03. It was over. She stood there, shaking, in the silent mill, the body of her father behind her, the disarmed weapon of mass destruction in front of her. She had won. But it felt like she had lost everything. Later, as the sun began to rise over the smoking ruins of Harmony Creek, she stood on the battered bridge. The last of the first sons had been rounded up. The SEALs, what was left of them, were being prepped for evac. Thorne walked over to her, his arm in a sling. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood beside her, looking out at the water. "Your father was a hero," he finally said, his voice quiet. "He was a monster." Anya replied, not looking at him. "He was a man," Thorne corrected her gently. "He made monstrous choices, but in the end, he made the right one. He saved us all. And he did it because of you." He held out his hand. In his palm was a small, scorched piece of metal. It was the insignia from the trader's uniform. "We found this." He wasn't just a soldier. He was a procurement officer from the Pentagon, the one who signed off on shutting down your father's project. He didn't just want the technology. He wanted revenge. He wanted to ruin your father's name, then profit from his genius. Poetic justice. The man who had destroyed her father's life had been destroyed by his own twisted plan. Anya looked at the insignia, then back at the town. She had come here as a mechanic, an outcast, a joke. She had been underestimated, dismissed, and ordered to stand down. But she had held the line. She had trusted her instincts. She had fought with a machine that was supposed to be a relic, and a heart that was supposed to be broken. Thorne looked at her, and for the first time, She saw not a commander looking at a subordinate, but a soldier looking at an equal. The look in his eyes was something she had spent her entire life trying to earn. It was respect. "What will you do now, Sergeant?" he asked. Anya thought of the key in her pocket, of the footlocker full of her father's secrets. She thought of the long road ahead, of the questions that still needed answers. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She had not only saved the town, she had saved her father's soul. And in doing so, she had finally found her own. "I'm going to go fix my tank," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. The fire was out, the bridge was held, and her war was just beginning.